الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والحمد لله الذي دل على وجوب وجوده افتقار الممكنات وعلى قدرته وعلمه أحكام المسنوات المنزه بجلال قدسه عن مناسبة الناقصات نحمده حمدا يملأ أقطار الأرض والسماوات ونشكره شكرا على نعمه المتظاهرات المتواترات والصلاة والسلام على رسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد بالقاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد فقد قال مولانا أمير المؤمنين يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء إنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره الشفاء ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البقاء صدق مولانا أمير المؤمنين. For the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. It's been called the expression of need from the needy to the needless. It's been called the articulation of desire from the powerless to the all-omnipotent. It's been called the act which connects a servant towards the Creator, and it's an act which has been emphasized within the religion of Islam, and that act is none other than the act of dua and supplication. When you look within the Holy Quran and the traditions of Ahlul Bayt, you find that there are a number of traditions and a number of verses that show the position of supplication within the religion of Islam. That's why when you look at the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, you'll find that the supplications found within the school of Ahlul Bayt are not found in any other school of thought. As in when you look at Dua Sabah, or you look at Dua Makarimul Akhlaq, or you look at many of the supplications found in Sahifa as-Sajjadiyah, and you examine them, you'll begin to see that each of these supplications is a university in and of itself. As in when you look in the time period of the fourth Imam, the political circumstances, they didn't allow for the fourth Imam to give sermons openly. Because if he began to give sermons openly, you would find there would be a crackdown upon him. But what they couldn't stop was a man from supplicating towards his Creator. So when Imam Zainul Abidin, he would make these du'as, you would find that the people of Medina, they would surround the Imam, they would listen to the Imam, and as he would be giving these supplications, you would find that they would be learning the fundamentals of the religion of Islam. And you find this reality of these du'as being a university is found in many of the supplications. But if I were to ask you that which supplication is that supplication which plays a primary role within your life, which supplication has facilitated your connection to the Creator, many of you will reply to me by saying Dua-e-Kumail, or the supplication of Kumail ibn Ziyad al-Nakha'i. You find many of our scholars, such as Allam al-Majlisi, They write that the position of Dua-e-Kumail is that it is the best of supplications within the school of Ahlul Bayt. Another group of scholars, they would come back and they would say that the position of Dua-e-Kumail to all other supplications is like the position of an insan and the human being to the rest of creation. Because when you look at the human being, the fact that the human being was given this inner messenger, this Rasul Batin called the Aql and the intellect of a human being, you find that it elevated him over the rest of creation. That's why one of the titles of Dua-e-Kumail is called Insan ul-Ad'iya. Ad'iya is the plural of the word dua. It's saying that the status of Dua-e-Kumail is like the status of the human being over the rest of creation. And when you begin to analyze the lines of the supplication, you'll begin to realize why Dua-e-Kumail has this position. For example, when Amir al-Mu'mineen says, فَحَبْنِي يَا إِلَهِي وَسَيَّدِي وَمَوْلَايَ وَرَبِّي صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النذر إلى كرامتك. What is the Imam saying? He says, "Oh my Lord, oh my Creator, oh my Master, oh my God, that if I am able to endure your punishment, how will I endure separation from you?" That the Imam, he shows that the reality of punishment is not that physical pain which is inflicted upon a person. The reality of punishment is banishment and separation from the reality of the Creator. Then he comes back and he says, "Oh Allah, if I am able to handle the heat of the fire, then how can if I am able to handle that, but how will I be able to handle not being able to look at your generosity?" That Amir al-Mu'mineen, he goes to show that on one level, if you're able to handle that pain, the idea and the facing of hopelessness is something which is even more painful. Or you go to another line within the supplication. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, "Ilahi man li ghayruk." He says, "Oh my Lord, who do I have besides for you?" You see, line after line, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he opens the door of ma'rifat in only the way that the one who has been given wilayah by Allah can do. You see, there's a difference between the levels of supplications found within this school of thought and in other schools of thought. And it's because that those who are giving these supplications, they have the maqam of being the wali of Allah. And that's why even when you go through the supplication, at the end, you come towards those lines which I recited at the beginning of the majlis. Those lines which state, "Ya Sari ar-Rida, Igfir liman la yamliku illa dua." Oh, the one whose pleasure is achieved very quickly. Forgive the one who owns nothing. He owns nothing except for supplication. Innaka fa'alun lima tasha. That you act in the way how you act. Ya man ismuhu dawa wa dhikruhu shafa wa ta'atuhu ghina. He says the one whose name is a cure and whose remembrance is what? His remembrance heals a person. The one whose obedience is a source of wealth. Irham man ra'su malihil ghina. Forgive the one whose capital is hope. Wasilahuhul buqa. And you find his weapon is tears. With that said, I come to the topic for tonight. The topic which I've decided upon this night is examining Dua-e-Kumail and the power of tears. You see this final line, Silahuhul buqa. Amir al-Mu'mineen goes to show that sometimes when you want to ascend the levels of reality, that which brings you closer to the Creator are those tears which come from your eyes. And on these nights when we gather, that many of us, we gather on these nights. Why? We gather on these nights to shed tears for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. You see, Dua-e-Kumail has a connection to Abu Abdullah as well. Why? Because when you look at the beginning of this dua, what do you say? say? You say, Allahumma inni as'aluka bi rahmatika allati wasi'at kulla shay. That, oh Allah, I ask you through your mercy which encompasses all things. You know, I've read that when some of the ulama, they did the tashri and the explanation and this first line of Dua-e-Kumail, they would say the best misdaq and manifestation of that expansive mercy of Allah is Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. That when you look at the title of Imam al-Hussein, you find one of his titles as Rahmatullah al-Wasi'ah, that Imam al-Hussein is that expansive mercy. This is the position of Dua-e-Kumail, and this is that one connection it has to the movement of Imam al-Hussein. But before I come to the heart of the analysis, there are a number of preliminary stages that we need to go through. The first preliminary stage is that we need to understand the position of dua within the supplications and the ayat of the Quran. When you look within the Holy Quran, you find there are a number of verses that emphasize the importance of supplication and the power of supplication within the life of a human being. For example, Allah says in one verse, قُلْ مَا يَعْبَأُ بِكُمْ رَبِّي لَوْلَا دُعَاؤُكُمْ. It says what? It says that your Lord would not care for you. My Lord would not care for you if it was not for your dua. That you see within this verse, that a human being has been created to worship. You find this dua is one of those things which elevates a human being. That's why when they came towards the fifth imam and they said to the fifth imam, the man, he says to him, that what should I do? Should I exceed in reciting the Quran or should I exceed in supplicating? The imam, he replied to him with this ayat of the Quran. He said to him that look at this verse. You find supplication has even a higher position because of this verse. You find no, you go to another verse of the Quran. Allah, he says, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي أَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. What is Allah saying? He says, when my servant asks about me, tell him that I am near, and I answer the supplications of the supplicant, and let him believe in me so that he will be guided. You find within this ayat, within this verse, Allah refers to his dhat by using this first person pronoun. When he says, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي أَنِّي فَإِنِّي, you find Allah refers to his essence 7 times within this verse. This is found nowhere else within the Holy Quran. That over here within this ayat, Allah keeps repeating the first person. So He shows to you the level of closeness that He has to you. You see that some Mufassirin said, the reason why this verse was revealed is because a man comes towards Rasulullah. He says, oh Rasulullah, is Allah close so I should whisper towards Him, or is Allah far so I should raise my voice towards Him? At the moment this ayat comes down, it says this is how near Allah is. And when you examine word by word in this ayat, you find the realities of supplication, they begin to become open towards you. For example, when it says وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ, why doesn't it say da'aka? You see, the difference between dua and this word su'al over here is that dua brings the attention of the caller, it brings the attention of the called upon the caller. But you find su'al, it has a slightly different meaning. Its meaning is that you are seeking gain. The one who is calling is seeking gain from the one that can give towards him. You find the end point of dua is this word su'al and asking from it. You find this verse, it says, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي أَنِّي. Then it goes to the next level. It doesn't say when the human beings ask from me. It says when my servant asks from me. You see the reality of ubudiyah, this word abd, you only use it for a creation which is aqil and has intellect. You don't use it for any other creation. You find the reality of ubudiyah is ownership. That Allah shows that I am the owner of the human being. If I want to change his destiny, if I want to open doors from him, then he is my servant. I have the right to give towards him. That's why we say that if Allah gives his wilayah towards someone, we don't have the right to question, because at the end of the day, wilayah is the ownership of Allah. He can give to whom he pleases. This is that reality. So you find these are the verses of the Holy Quran. And there are a number of narrations that come forth that show how important this act of supplication is. For example, the Prophet would say that hold on to the weapon of the believers. When the companions, they would say, Ya Rasulullah, what is the weapon of the believers? He would say, what? He would say, dua is that weapon. You find that some man, he comes to the second Imam. He says that what is the distance between the heavens and the earth? Imam al-Hasan replies by saying, the distance between the heavens and the earth is the cry of an oppressed person during dua. And you find narration after narration, it comes forth. But when you look at dua and you come towards Dua-e-Kumail specifically, you find du'as, they open the doors towards different realities. They open the doors towards ma'rifah, as I was saying. But you find the Ahlul Bayt, they had a way. They would say, تَقَلَّمَ النَّاسِ عَلَىٰ قَدْرِ عُقُولِهِمْ, that speak to the people at the level of their intellects. You know, when you look at the supplication, and Amir al-Mu'mineen is giving this supplication to an individual like Kumail, it's important for us to understand the reality of who Kumail bin Ziyad is. For Amir al-Mu'mineen to give a supplication with so much intricacy and depth within it, you would find that Kumail bin Ziyad must have been an individual who can handle those realities. You know, when you look at the biography of Kumail, Kumail's full name is Kumail ibn Ziyad al-Nakha'i. You find there were a group of companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen from the land of Yemen, this Nakha tribe. They were originally from Yemen and they moved towards Kufa. You find Awais al-Qarani is a companion from Yemen. You find Malik al-Ashtar originally is from Yemen. You find Kumail is from amongst those individuals. And Sayyid al-Murtada in his book Rasail would say that Kumail was one of the 10 closest confidants of Amir al-Mu'mineen, to the extent that Kumail was given the title of Sahib al-Sir. That Sahib al-Sir is that title which says that Kumail was the companion of the secrets of Amir al-Mu'mineen. You know, Kumail bin Ziyad, he narrates, he says there are times in a person's life when he's going through difficulty. And in those times, Ali ibn Abi Talib takes that man by the hand and he shows him the secrets of creation. Many a night I spent with Ali ibn Abi Talib, where my yaqeen and certainty in Allah, it increased upon those nights. You see, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Kumail is saying that in time periods of difficulty, it was when those realities were revealed towards me. When you go towards Al-Kafi, there's a narration that says, the Ahlul Bayt, they say, none can understand our narrations except for the prophets, the closest angels, and who's the third group? The believer who's been tested. You see, Kumail was tested time and time again. It's through these tests that Kumail, he attained this reality of being the one who holds the secrets of Amir al-Mu'mineen. You know, it's stated that one day after the battle of Siffin, Amir al-Mu'mineen is walking with Kumail ibn Ziyad. As they're walking, he hears a man reciting the Quran from within his home in the most beautiful of voices. Kumail says, "Oh my master, master that look how beautiful the voice of this individual is when he's reciting the Quran. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he looks at Kumail. He says, Kumail, very soon a day will come when I'll tell you about that man. You know, it was the battle of Nahrawan, that when they killed the Khawarij, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, oh Kumail, you see the body of that individual upon the ground over there. Kumail says, oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, I see that body. He says, oh Kumail, you remember that night when you and me were walking and we heard a man reciting the Quran in the most beautiful of voice, and you said to me that, do you hear that man? And I told you that a day will come when I'll tell you about him. Oh Kumail, this is that man. And then he says, oh Kumail, what is the point of reciting the Quran if you can't understand my position within the Quran? You see, Amir al-Mu'mineen elevated Kumail in this way. It's stated in another incident that after Amir al-Mu'mineen was in Masjid al-Kufa, he takes Kumail bin Ziyad by the hand. He takes him towards the outskirts of Kufa. He says, oh Kumail, verily these hearts are like containers, and the best of these hearts are those that can contain the most knowledge. He says, Kumail, people are of three types. Either they are those pious scholars, or they are those students who are trying to attain salvation, or they're like that riff which flows with the winds whichever direction it goes, and the light of ilm is not within their heart. You see, Amir al-Mu'mineen in this narration, he describes ilm as a light, that it's a nur within the heart of the individual. Then he says, oh Kumail, knowledge is greater than wealth. Why? Because you guard your wealth, whereas your knowledge, it protects you, Kumail. He says, oh Kumail, when you spend wealth, it begins to decrease, but when you distribute your knowledge, it increases. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he goes on in this lengthy narration until a point comes where he breaks down crying and he says, oh Kumail, how I wish there were individuals who could handle the knowledge that I contain within my heart. You see, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he does this with Kumail. And another incident it comes. That incident when he tells him about Dua-e-Kumail, you find Amir al-Mu'mineen was in the Masjid of Kufa. When he was in Masjid al-Kufa, he stated upon the mimbar, he says that the one who spends the 15th of Sha'ban in worshipping Allah and he recites the dua of Prophet Khidr, that individual, his du'as will be accepted. You find Amir al-Mu'mineen, after saying this statement, he gets off the mimbar and he goes towards his home. You see, this is what differentiated Kumail bin Ziyad from other individuals. It was the desire of Kumail to be close towards Amir al-Mu'mineen. The narration, it states that Kumail, he follows Amir al-Mu'mineen towards his house. He knocks upon the door. He says, oh my master Amir al-Mu'mineen, tonight you said about the dua of Khidr. Why don't you teach me the dua of Khidr? The first time Amir al-Mu'mineen, he doesn't reply. Kumail, he asked for a second time. Amir al-Mu'mineen doesn't reply. It was on the third occasion that Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Kumail, I'm going to teach you this dua. Write this dua down. And oh Kumail, know that if you can recite this dua every Thursday night, recite it. But no, if you can't recite it every Thursday night, recite it once a month. No, if you can't recite it once a month, recite it once a year. Then he says, oh Kumail, if you can't even do that, recite it once in your lifetime. For this is that supplication which will help you, which will protect you from your enemies. It'll increase your sustenance and it will lead to the forgiving of your sins, oh Kumail. You see, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he picks his companions very carefully when he wants to unveil his secrets. That when Kumail, he asked for this dua, Amir al-Mu'mineen only gave this dua after Kumail asked, and on the third occasion he gave it towards them. And when you examine this dua, you find line after line unveils that ma'rifat about Allah within this supplication. Now, of course, I can't go through this whole supplication, but I can take snippets of different parts and analyze them. You see this supplication, when it starts, the reality is that the starting of this dua is with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. That this dua, the first line which Amir al-Mu'mineen gave towards Kumail was that line known as Bismillah. You find the power of Bismillah is this, is that Amir al-Mu'mineen narrates that Rasulullah said, that, you know, look at this chain. Amir al-Mu'mineen is narrating from Rasulullah. Or if I can change my words, Babu Madinatul Ilm is narrating from Madinatul Ilm. He says that Rasulullah states that any action which begins without Bismillah, that action, it remains incomplete. You find another narration. If you want to understand the power of Bismillah, our seventh Imam says that whenever you have any difficulty, whenever you have any anxiety within your life, go outside and underneath the sky, say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim 3 times, and insha'Allah, Allah will solve that problem for you. You see, what's the reality of Bismillah? You know, one mystic would say that within Bismillah is a journey of spirituality, even from the ba towards the seen in Bismillah. You know, the ba, it represents bidayah and the journey of a man in spirituality. Seen represents the secrets of the realities of creation, of the realities of Allah. He says that when you look between the ba and the seen, that alif in between, that alif of ism, it becomes submerged, it becomes lost. Why? Because in Arabic, sometimes the alif is a conjoining alif. That, for example, if I said ism in the beginning of a sentence, that alif is there. But if there's a word before that, it becomes conjoined. You find he says that if you want to make this journey from the ba towards the seen, from the beginning towards the secrets of realities, then this alif representing ana and your ego must be dissolved in this journey. That this is the reality of Bismillah. And it starts with what? It starts with the name Allah. You find Allah is that Ism Jam, where all of the attributes of Allah, they come together on this one locus known as the Ism Jam. You know, when you look at the names of Allah, the names of Allah can be divided into 2 categories. The names of Jalal and the grandeur of Allah. For example, the name like Al-Qadir, the one who has power, is one of the names of Jalal. But on the other side, you have names of Jamal and the beauty of Allah. Names such as Latif, names such as Rahman, the beneficent. You know, I remember they asked one scholar that who is greater, Abbas or Ali Akbar? You know, he replied by saying, in the way that Allah has his names of Jalal and Jamal, it's not that you can compare who's greater between Abbas and Ali Akbar, but they represent different sides of the Imam. Akbar represents the Jamal of Imam al-Hussein. Abbas represents the Jalal of Imam al-Hussein. That's why Akbar was more muhib, whereas Abbas was more aziz. You know, they asked Rasulullah, "Oh Rasulullah, who do you love more, Ali or Fatima?" Rasulullah gave the same answer. He said, Fatima is more muhib, Fatima is more love, but Ali is more aziz. You find izzah and love, they're both different types of love. It's a showing that there is no comparison between the two, but rather whether it's apples to oranges, it's a different type of love within this situation. So you find Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Then it says Rahman Rahim. The difference between Rahman and Rahim is what? Rahman is the mercy of Allah. Rahim is the mercy of Allah. But Rahman is that mercy that goes on to all of creation. Whereas Rahim is that continuing mercy for the believers which will remain until the day of judgment as well. You know, the human being, you find all of his needs are fulfilled through Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. That you find there are 3 stages in our journey of existence. First is from non-existence to existence. The second stage is what? That sustenance to keep us alive. The third stage is the stage of forgiveness in the hereafter for the maqam of baqa. You find Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allah is that name who brings from non-existence to existence. Rahman is that name through which all of creation came to being and provided that sustenance. Rahim is that name which gives him that forgiveness within the hereafter. This is the reality of this name. The 11th Imam would say that Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim is closer to the Ism Adam of Allah than the iris is to the eye. That this is how close the reality of Bismillah is towards that great name of Allah which is a reality. You know, there's a famous story amongst the ulama of Najaf al-Ashraf. There was once a man. He came to Najaf. He spent 15-20 years in Najaf, but he didn't study properly. He tried his best, but he wasn't able to gain the knowledge that a person could within that time period. Before he left, he went to the haram of Amir al-Mu'mineen. When he went towards the shrine of Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, "Oh Ali, I left everything to come and study near you, but I didn't gain what I needed to gain." It's stated that night, that individual, he goes to sleep. Amir al-Mu'mineen within that man's dream whispers Bismillah into the ear of that individual. He says that when Amir al-Mu'mineen whispered Bismillah into my ears, I found that realities of knowledge, they became open for me. The next day, I went to the Dars-e-Kharij class of Sheikh Murtada Ansari. You know, when Sheikh Murtada Ansari would give his Dars-e-Kharij, first he would bring the discussion, then he would bring all of the possible counter arguments to the discussion, then he would refute every single counter argument. You find that nobody would have the chance to object within his Dars-e-Kharij. That man, this individual, he goes towards his class and he raises an objection which disproves Sheikh Murtada Ansari. Sheikh Murtada Ansari says to that man that come to me after the class. When he goes to him after the class, he says towards him, he says, the one who whispered Bismillah in your ears read all the way up to Dhaleen in my ears. That this is that reality which opened up for this individual. Now when you look at Dua-e-Kumail, you find the first line is what? Allahumma inni as'aluka bi rahmatika allati wasi'at kulla shay. You know, you're saying the line Allahumma, you're not saying Ya Allah. That what is the difference between Ya Allah and Allahumma? You find Ya Allah, it begins with the letter Ya, but when you remove the Ya, the Meme gets added on towards the end. That if you want to look at the greatness of this dua, that after Bismillah, the first name that comes in this dua is the name of Allah. It signifies to us that this thing which should precede everything in our life is the entity of Allah. You know, you look at Aba Abdullah, right? The movement of Aba Abdullah was a movement of Tawheed. It was a movement of La ilaha illallah. That when you say La ilaha, there is no God, you find that this not only symbolizes kufr, but it symbolizes the system of kufr and anything which we make preceding Allah within our lifetimes. Whether it's our own self, whether it's our own desires, whether it's that power which we have. When Imam al-Hussein, he raised raises the sword, this sword is raised in the name of La ilaha, that all of these false gods which were created within that time period, that the Imam, he rose to destroy them. That when you look at Yazid, you find Yazid's power had deceived him, that he says La'ibat Hashim bil mulki wala ja'a khabarun wala wahyun. He says what? He says Hashim, Banu Hashim, they played with the kingdom. No news or revelation had come towards them. You find Yazid, he became deceived by that power. But Imam al-Hussein shows the reality of that with his movement. And on the day of Ashura, when he goes into his final prostration, he shows the reality of illallah, that I sacrificed everything at that moment, but in my final moments I remembered my creator. That's why when you try to understand who Imam al-Hussein is, correct, you can look at different angles towards the Imam. The philosopher will examine from the philosophical angle. The one who is in love with social justice will examine the movement of Imam al-Hussein from that angle. But you find when you want to look at the reality of the Imam, I say the Imam is the illa in la ilaha illallah. That what does the statement mean? That the Imam is the illa in la ilaha illallah. You know, when you look at this kalima, correct? The first half of this kalima is la ilaha, there is no God. The first half of this kalima is complete kufr, complete disbelief. This kalima, it ends with the word Allah. That word which connects la ilaha towards Allah is that word illa in between. That if you want to see an entity that can take a person from disbelief to belief, from kufr towards tawheed, then that illa is Hussein ibn Ali. And on this night, when we remember Hur, we begin to see that on this night, Hur, he was in between heaven and hell. But what did Hur reflect upon this night? Hur, he reflected upon the position of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. And it's this reflection elevated Hur from being la'natullah alayh until the day of judgment to being alayhi salam until the day of judgment. You see this dua, it starts, Allahumma inni as'aluka bi rahmatika allati wasi'at kulla shay wa bi quwwatika allati qaharta biha kulla shay. And it says, oh Allah, by your power which makes everything subservient towards you, wa khada'a laha kulla shay, and everything is humble before you, wa dalla laha kulla shay, and everything is lowered before you. And then it says what? Wa bi jabarutika allati ghalabta biha kulla shay, and by your invincibility which overpowers everything. You know, when you want to understand this word jabarut, correct? You find this word, it signifies what? It signifies that man has shortcomings and flaws within him, but it's Allah who can overcome. It's Allah who can give the individuals the tools that are needed to overcome. That's why Allah, he encompasses all of creation. You see line after line of this dua. You find those lines which I recited at the beginning of the lecture, they come up. Ya sari' ar-rida, igfir liman la yamliku illa dua. Oh, the one whose pleasure is quickly attained, forgive the one who owns nothing except dua. You see this reality, it shows that Allah's mercy is so great that when you work for Allah, his pleasure is attained very quickly. Then he says what? Forgive the one who has nothing except dua. Ya man ismuhu dawa wa dhikruhu shafa. He says the one whose name is a cure, whose remembrance is a remedy, whose obedience is a source of wealth, whose capital is hope, and what? Whose weapon are his tears. You see, when you want to understand the position of tears, and you look at the narration of the Imam, the sixth Imam has a narration that every eye will cry upon the day of judgment except for three sets of eyes. The first is the one that lowers itself, that closes itself before what Allah has made prohibited. The second is the one that struggles in the obedience of Allah. The third is the one that in the middle of the night it cries out of the fear of Allah. But I add one narration towards this. The narration is of Rasulullah. The narrator is Fatimatu Zahra salamullahi alayha. Zahra says, كل عين باقية على يوم القيامة إلا عين بكت على مصاب الحسين. She says every tear, every eye will cry upon the day of judgment, except for that eye which cries over the musibah of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Then these tears which come from your eyes. I said upon the first night that many people, they ask that I try to cry for the Imam, but why don't these tears, they fall? Sometimes these tears themselves are a tawfiq from Allah, that they are a blessing from Allah. Amir al-Mu'mineen would say, Ma jaffat al-dumu' illa li kaswat al-qulub, wa ma kasat al-qulub illa li katrat al-dunub. He says what? He says the tears, they don't become dry except when the hearts, they harden. And the hearts, they don't harden except for when the sins, they begin to increase. Sometimes it's these sins which you and I make that prevent us from having the opportunity to cry for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. That's why if you want to see how your level of wilaya is, how your level of ishq for the Imam is, see that when the name of the Imam is said, when the musibah of the Imam is said, do tears, they fall from your eyes at that moment? Because in the way when a child comes into this world, if that child doesn't cry, it signifies the death of the physical life of that child. Because through the crying that child, it comes to life. You find this is a lesson for us, that if you want to know whether your spiritual heart is alive, see whether tears are able to fall from your eyes. For if tears are able to fall, then at that moment you know that your heart is alive. And when it comes to the tears for Imam al-Hussein, it's not just one drop, but rather these tears are entire revolution in and of themselves. One poet would say, don't look at tears as a sign of weakness, but rather look at them as a sign of power. It's stated that one day, one of the students of Allama al-Hilli saw Allama al-Hilli within his dream. He said to him, that listen, you were a scholar of this great magnitude, that what is your position within the hereafter right now? What is your position in Barzakh? Allama al-Hilli says to him, he says that I was going through a much difficulty, that everything I did, I had to answer for. But then he says this one line, he says, Lola al-Fain wa dhikr al-Hussein halaktu. He said, if it wasn't for Al-Fain is a book in which he wrote 2,000 virtues of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He said, if it wasn't for Al-Fain and the zikr and the remembrance of Hussein, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein I did in my life, I would be destroyed. That you see, this is that reality. I mentioned the narration on night 1, but I didn't have a chance to go in depth on the narration. You find upon the 1st of Muharram, when Rayhan ibn Shabib, he sees the 8th Imam. The 8th Imam says, Yabna Shabib, in kunta baqiyan ala shay'in fabki lil Hussein ibn Ali. He says, oh Yabna Shabib, that if you ever want to cry, then cry over Hussein ibn Ali. You see the gham of Imam al-Hussein. The sadness of Imam al-Hussein isn't like any other pain within this world. Because every other pain, it breaks the peace in the heart of an individual. But that sadness of Hussein brings peace into the heart of an individual. Every other pain, people, they seek to avoid that sadness. But have you ever seen a sadness anticipated like the mourning of Sayyid al-Shuhada? That people, they wait until these 10 days start. Why do they wait? They wait so they can go to the majlis of Hussein, so they could shed tears in the majlis of Imam al-Hussein. You see, Imam al-Hussein is that individual that he elevates a person. And on this night, we remember the one whom the Imam he elevated, and that is Hur. When you look at Hur, correct, Hur is the one whom the Imam was stopped in Karbala because of Hur. You know, it's stated that the Imam, when the army of Hur stops the Imam sees the army coming from a distance. When he sees the army coming from a distance, he says, "Oh Abbas, oh Akbar," that these individuals, they look thirsty to the extent that the companions of Imam al-Hussein, they gave water towards that army. One person, he narrates that I was so tired that I couldn't even get my camel to sit at that moment. But when I was in such a state, I saw a man come towards me. That man was none other than Sayyidul Shuhada. He takes my camel by the rein, he makes the camel sit down, and he gives me water with his hands. You see, that same army that'll stop water from going towards Sayyid al-Shuhada. This is the mercy and the love within the heart of the Imam. You see, the Imam, he speaks to Hur. Hur says to the Imam that you recite prayer over here and then we will recite prayer over here. The Imam says to Hur on the correction, you find the Imam says, "Oh Hur, that one group will recite here, you'll recite over there." But Hur replies by saying, "Oh Aba Abdullah, everyone will recite prayer behind you." You see, the Imam, he shows that when one recognizes the position of the Imam, no matter how late it is within his life, he can change his eternal destiny. You find that they pray behind the Imam. You find Hur, he says to the Imam that Ibn Ziyad has ordered that you can't go any farther. The Imam says, "Oh Hur, may your mother weep over you, oh Hur." At that moment, Hur, he says that if your mother was anyone other than Fatimatul Zahra, I would say the same statement back towards you. You see, it was on the 2nd of Muharram, upon that day, that Hur, he began to think, and the Imam, using the name of Zahra, made Hur go through these realizations which would ultimately lead him towards changing sides upon the night before Ashura. You know, it's stated upon Shab-e Ashur, Hur, he would look at the side of Umar bin Saad, he would look at the side of Hussein. At one point, he sees a man leaving from the tents. He said to that man, "Where are you going?" He's saying, "I'm going to give water towards my horse." Hur, he begins to think that Aba Abdullah, the son of Zahra, doesn't have water, yet this man is giving water to his horse at that moment. They said to Hur, "Oh Hur, you seem like you are in a state of confusion upon this night." Hur, he replies by saying that I find myself in between heaven and hell upon this night. They say, "Oh Hur, what do you mean?" He says to the man, "Come with me." When the man, he goes with Hur, Hur, he says, "Do you hear those children saying Al-Atash, Al-Atash, the thirst, the thirst?" He says, "It's because of me that they're crying at that moment." You know, the narrations, they state that on the night before Ashura, Hur, he decides to go to the side of the Imam. The narrations, they differ whether his son joined, whether his servant joined, but they say that the son of Hur, his servant and Hur, they go to the side of Sayyidul Shuhada. When they go to the side of Sayyidul Shuhada, Hur says, "Oh my son, these eyes, they looked at Hussein with anger, covered these eyes with a piece of cloth." Then they said, "Oh my son, these hands, they grabbed the rein from the horse of Sayyidul Shuhada, tie these hands behind my back." Hur, with his eyes covered, with his hands tied behind his back, he's going towards Sayyidul Shuhada. As he's going towards Sayyidul Shuhada, the Imam says, "Oh Abbas, my guest is coming towards me." You find as Hazrat Abbas goes towards Hur, you find Hur says to his son, "I noticed that a man is coming." The son says, "That man is Abbas ibn Ali." Hur says, "Oh my son, tell Abbas that I haven't come to fight, but I've come to ask for forgiveness." You find a hor, he goes towards the imam. When he gets to the imam, he falls at the feet of the imam. He says, hal min tawbali. He says, is there forgiveness for me? You find the imam says, oh hor, not only have I forgiven you, but Allah has forgiven you, oh hor, upon this day. You find the hor, he says, oh my master, when I spoke to you earlier, you said layyan kalamaka. You said soften your voice for my sisters, they can hear. Oh my master, let me go ask forgiveness from your sister Zainab. You find hor, he goes towards the tent of the women upon his horse. He says, oh daughters of Rasulullah, is there any forgiveness for hor? You find the women, they begin to cry. When the women, they begin to cry, hor says that, oh hor, you made the daughters of Fatima to Zahra cry once more. He gets off his horse. When he gets off his horse, Sayyidah Zainab says, oh hor, I'll intercede with you upon the day of judgment, for you supported my brother Hussein. You find the musibah, it goes. Hor, he goes back towards Imam al-Hussein. He says, oh my master, it's because of me that you're here. Why don't you let me send my son first? You know, the narration, it says that the son of Hor, he goes towards the Maqtal. He fights until he falls upon the ground. When he falls upon the ground, he sends his salams towards his father. When he sends his salams towards his father, Hor goes towards his son. When he gets towards his son, what does he see? He sees the head of his son in the lap of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Hor says, oh my master, why have you come to the son of your servant? You know what the imam says? He says, oh Hor, a father should never have to go to the body of his son. But I say this was before Dhuhr. After Dhuhr, a time will come when Ali Akbar will fall towards the ground. The imam will go up on his elbows to the body of Ali Akbar. With his hands, the father will take the arrow out of the... Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ya Allah, we ask upon this night for the forgiveness of the believers. We ask for the opportunity to walk upon the path of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, for the intercession of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. You know, it's stated that on the day of Ashura, when Hur, he falls to the ground for the final time, he calls upon Imam al-Hussein. But when the Imam comes, you find the companions, Muslim ibn Awsaj, you find Habib ibn Madahir and other companions, they come. Hur, he says, O Ashab of Imam al-Hussein, O the companions of Imam al-Hussein, I'm making my final will towards you, that as long as you're alive, make sure no arrow comes towards my master. But I say, what point comes upon the day of Ashura when they surround the Imam from all sides and the body of the Imam is covered in... We ask through the right of the Imam for the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time. Rabbana taqabbal minna innaka antas samiul alim. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. السلام عليك يا فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى ناصر الأمين. السلام الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليك يا شمس الشموس أنيس النفوس، أيها المدفون بأرض توز، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك، وجعلنا من أوانك وأنصارك والمستشهدين بين يدي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.